Auto insurance fraud stories from Quebec, Alberta, and Ontario, and one regulator's new program to try and combat insurance fraud. Today on Insurance in Canada. Hello and welcome to another episode of Insurance in Canada. My name is Rick Pereira, so glad you can join me today. So when I go looking for stories to discuss on this channel, I don't go looking for a particular theme, but over the last few days, I've noticed been quite a few stories in the news about insurance fraud. So I guess we're doing a themed episode today about insurance fraud. So a few stories about busts in criminal activity, criminal gangs, organized crime when it comes to insurance fraud, and one regulator's new program to try and combat it. So without further ado, let's get right into insurance in the news. So when I go looking for stories to talk about on this channel, I don't go looking for any particular theme or overarching lesson to be learned. It's just lately there's been a lot of stories that I've been noticing that deal with insurance fraud. So when it comes to insurance fraud, there's many sources for fraud. Obviously, the policyholders themselves would be a large percentage. People putting in fake claims, overinflated claims. But another source is the service providers. And by service providers, I mean those individuals, companies who provide some sort of claim service or service to the insured regarding a claim that's paid for by the insurance company. So whether that be a rehabilitation service that's treating the injuries or helping the insured recover from an injury that they suffered in an automobile accident, a contractor that's repairing damage to an insured's property, or in this case, tow truck operators. In this particular story, this one is coming from Brampton, Ontario, regarding a bust by the Peel Regional Police on several tow truck operators engaged in fraudulent and other activity here in the GTA, Greater Toronto area. So let's take a look at this first story. GTA Police bust organized insurance fraud scheme network, from Josh Racamera. Police in the Greater Toronto area say they've dismantled an organized network involved in insurance fraud schemes connected to the local towing industry. The investigation, dubbed Project Outsource, focused on staged vehicle collisions and related criminal activity designed to defraud insurers and gain control over parts of the towing sector. Peel Regional Police Chief Nishan Duraipa, apologize if I butchered the name there, said the investigation, which began in July 2024, uncovered what police described as a coordinated effort by individuals associated with several towing companies to inflate insurance claims by intentionally staging crashes. These incidents, according to the police, were followed by fraudulent repair costs and inflated service fees submitted to insurance providers. So stage crashes are still not going to say significant, but because of the prevalence of dash cams and videos, cameras all over the place, it's not as easy to get away with stage crashes as it used to be. The most common stage accident where we have one vehicle belonging to the scammer on the highway who pulls in front of somebody and slams on their brakes, forcing the innocent motorist in the back to slam into their vehicle. The scammer then claims that they're injured and tries to seek compensation or a settlement for their injuries. Before the widespread use of dash cam, it would always be difficult for the innocent motorist to try and prove that the other party was the one who slammed on their brakes for no reason. But like I said, with the use of dash cams, and I can't recommend enough the consideration of installing a dash cam in your vehicle if you have one to protect yourself. But before it was very difficult, so a lot of the times the insurance companies would just try and settle out of court because they didn't have much evidence to try and prove that their policyholder wasn't the actual ones that were the ones who were liable for the injuries that they suffer. Sometimes these scammers would actually sell seats in their vehicles to other people who want to get in on the scam to try and get some sort of compensation for their fake injuries as well. That was kind of a tip-off, though, that there was something going on where we have like 4 people in a vehicle and none of these people are related or can prove that they knew each other before the accident. So that was kind of a tip-off that there's something going on. So I can't guarantee that this is what was going on in this article when they're talking about intentionally staging crashes. So something way more involved to try and... Obviously, being in the tow industry, they know the tricks to try and stage this accident to make it look like a real accident without there being too much evidence for the insurance company to try and prove that it's staged. In addition to financial fraud, the group is accused of using intimidation tactics, including threats, physical violence, and firearms, to establish dominance in the towing industry. Okay. This is a much more serious scenario. Police allege these methods were used to control access to collision scenes and secure towing contracts, often at the expense of other operators and insurers. So, yikes. That's crazy. A total of 18 individuals, 17 of whom were men from Brampton and 1 woman from King City, have been arrested and are facing 97 charges, including fraud, conspiracy, extortion, and weapons offenses. Investigators say the operation is a significant step towards addressing organized criminal activity that has been affecting both the insurance industry and public safety. As part of the investigation, police seized 18 tow trucks, 5 stolen vehicles, 4 personal vehicles, 6 firearms, hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and 2 bulletproof vests. So this was, I'm not going to say a sophisticated operation, but definitely a serious operation. Authorities say the fraudulent activity contributed to increased claims costs, which can have a broader impact on insurance premiums paid by consumers. That is true. So there was back, I think it was 2013, well, it's thinking to be 2011, the Insurance Bureau of Canada hired a company called KPMG to try and estimate what the percentage of automobile insurance claims were fraudulent, which that would be a very difficult task. But KPMG undertook it, and I think it was 2013 they put out their report. And by their estimation, 15 to 30% of claims, automobile insurance claims in Ontario, were fraudulent claims, either staged accident, inflated damage, fake injuries, along those lines. So even going on the low end of 15%, that's a significant percentage of claims that's being paid out to fraudsters, and it's the policyholders that will eventually pay for it in higher premiums. So anything that the authorities, regulators, provincial governments, territorial governments can do to try and combat it, the better. So that is a tow truck story in Ontario. The next one regarding the tow trucks in Alberta. Apparently, some of the bad players are taking their show on the road. The same fraudulent or tow truck fraud traveling to Alberta, the same fraudulent tow truck practices that exploded in Ontario have traveled west to Alberta, Ekate Association investigators warn. If you're not familiar with the Ekate Association, that is an organization. I believe they started back in they were created back in 2022. They combined the investigation service of the Insurance Bureau of Canada along with the Canadian Insurance Crime Prevention Bureau, I forget the exact name, into one organization. So Ekate Association operates throughout Canada. They're not local to any one province, so they are fighting not just automobile insurance, but all types of insurance fraud on a national basis. They also are the organization every year. I'm not sure in other provinces, but definitely in Ontario, every year they put out the list and announce it, put out a news bulletin That's picked up by most news agency, indicating the top 10 vehicles stolen in Canada and the top 10 vehicles stolen in every province. I'm not sure about the territories, but definitely in every province. So it's always interesting to take a look. You can go actually on their website right now to take a look to see what the top 10 vehicles stolen in your province, as well as Canada-wide, to see in the different provinces as well, to see how they differ each province when it comes to which is the most popular vehicle to be stolen in that particular province. There have been reports of towing operators' vehicles still displaying 416 area codes from Toronto, demonstrating that Ontario towers are bringing predatory strategies to Alberta. That's kind of a dead giveaway if you're in Alberta and you see a tow truck driving around or pulling up to you to offer services and their phone number is not even an Alberta phone number. I guess that's a pretty good indication you probably shouldn't be dealing with those folks. Ontario was a testing ground for predatory tow practices, and trends show that Alberta is becoming the proving grounds. Interesting. There have been reports of tow truck operators taking advantage of drivers when their vehicles need to be towed. Their fraud tactics include charging excessive fees and surcharges, charging fees for services that didn't occur, refusing to release a vehicle to its owner, or falsely claiming to work with insurance companies. In some cases, these tow truck operators show up unannounced at the scene of an accident by monitoring policy, I think it's police scanners, or patrolling busy areas. They then pressure drivers to use their business instead of their preferred choice. It's unfortunate that they do this. I mean, people who are in need of a tow are a bit of a vulnerable situation, especially after an accident. And it's kind of scummy that you're trying to take advantage of these people. But unfortunately, there's always going to be somebody out there is trying to make a quick buck, whatever they can. And, the tow industry, at least here in Ontario, has always had an image problem. I know I work in the insurance industry, and that might seem like the pot calling the kettle black, but over the last few years, the tow industry has really tried to work with the government to try and get rid of the bad players. I'm not saying every tow truck operator is a bad player, but there's definite bad players that they need to get rid of in order to not only benefit consumers, not here in Ontario, but also in other provinces, but to improve the image for the legitimate tow truck operators, companies out there. What's being taken advantage of is the disconnect between what might have been communicated to that consumer at the roadside, what the towing and storage actually looks like, and then how the insurance company is in the position of retroactively trying to manage the expense and reasonableness of that transaction. To me, and that's from Andy Dykstra, Associate Vice President of Enterprise Fraud at Cooperators, to me, the concern would be that it becomes as out of hand as it has been and continues to be in some Ontario markets, continues to be in some Ontario markets in the large urban centers of Calgary and Edmonton, he says. The Edmonton Police Service recently charged 11 owners from 10 local tow truck companies for fraudulent billing practices to insurance companies following an investigation spanning March to May 2025, so very recent. Police estimate these 10 companies fraudulently billed insurance companies for more than $120,000. Once again, if the insurance companies can't prove that these are fraudulent bills, they have to pay it. Once again, fraudulent costs get passed on to the consumer and the policyholder, with increased premiums. The costs associated with tow truck fraud are stacking up for insurers. Many insurers have resources dedicated to managing billing abuse in tow and storage transactions. I guess the insurance companies know where their sources of fraud or where to look for, so I suppose they're going to dedicate more resources to that. But it's an expensive issue that drives auto physical damage claims costs, and it's labor intensive to manage. The Ontario government enacted provincial legislation effective January 1st, 2024 to crack down on fraudulent tow truck practices. Under the new regulations, tow and storage operators must be certified by the province and subject to a code of conduct. Ontario consumers can also verify tow and storage operator certificate status and maximum rates through a government portal. Um, but when Ontario regulated its industry, Equity Association reports tow companies began popping up in Alberta, which lacks the same regulations. So if you're in Alberta, I recommend you knock on the door of your, I'm not sure if they're member of provincial parliament or MLAs, and tell them to get on that. It doesn't take much to copy and paste some other provinces' bill to enact it as your own. So, and that should be in every province and territory in Canada. If you check to see if your particular province or territory has the sort of regulation that Ontario has, and if it doesn't, it's something you definitely want to, if you're the type of person who keeps in contact with your provincial representative, to get them to get on that, because it's beneficial to every consumers throughout Canada to have it, and it's provincially regulated. So since bylaws can differ from one municipality to the other, harmonized yet still provincial approach to regulation might prove the most effective, Dykstra said. There's too much manipulation that can happen with patchwork regulation. On a high level, there needs to be some sort of overarching requirements at the provincial level as to what screening occurs before you license someone to be a tow operator. So that's one source of fraud in the automobile insurance sector. So that's from one service provider. Our next story is another source of fraud you find in automobile insurance, also from Ontario as well, regarding what is known as phantom vehicles. Never comes back to you. Corrupt Service Ontario worker brags about her role in a scheme to sell stolen cars. A W5 investigations from CTV News from John Woodward. W5 investigation is shedding light on how at least one corrupt employee of the agency that licenses vehicles in Ontario has been helping thieves steal them. In one case, bragging she could help a driver avoid a highway toll and even driving a stolen car herself. Wow. That employee, a woman named Tanisha Baird, who worked at a Service Ontario in Brampton. Wow, Brampton just seems to be popping up a lot in the news these days. Just west of Toronto, was convicted of conspiring with the director of a nearby auto body shop, Eric Johnson, in a scheme that the court heard involved people as far away as Saskatchewan. Baird was called My Girl by Johnson in intercepted phone calls that were entered into evidence in the case. Another call, Baird bragged she could disguise any vehicle within the Ontario Ministry of Transportation system. Let's say, for example, you're on the 407, you don't pay the bills, and it never comes back to you. Baird is heard saying the court heard that of the 3 stolen cars she was found guilty of trafficking, one of them was a $45,000 Audi SUV. She paid just $162 in taxes. It was the same vehicle she was driving when she was arrested. So I mentioned the phantom vehicle, so that is where a fraudster would take the VIN of a vehicle that has been disposed of and tries to register just the VIN with the provincial territorial body that licenses vehicles in that particular jurisdiction, gets it registered in their name, goes out, gets insurance, waits a little while, reports the vehicle stolen. Obviously, the vehicle is never going to be found because there is no vehicle, places the claim with the insurance company, and eventually gets paid out for the theft loss, even though there was no such vehicle. In Ontario, it's a little difficult to do that because in order to register a used vehicle in Ontario, the person selling the vehicle has to fill out a used vehicle package. But in order for the buyer to register that vehicle in Ontario, they need a safety standard certificate from a garage that is licensed to do safety standard certificates to. The safety standard certificate is there to prove that the vehicle is safe to be on the road. But obviously, in order for a garage to do this, the vehicle has to be brought to the garage. So without that, they're not going to issue a safety standard certificate. So in order for this scam to be pulled off, you're going to need somebody at a Service Ontario office to help register the vehicle, even though there's no vehicle, which we had. And we're also going to need a garage that's going to issue the safety standard certificate for a vehicle that doesn't exist, which was also part of this investigation. And one of the individuals that was arrested in this operation was a local garage that was actually doing this. So if you have that many people involved, then it's going to be a rather sophisticated operation, but you don't usually see people involved in the scam, driving around in these fake vehicles. But obviously in this case, they were stolen vehicles as opposed to the phantom vehicle. In this case, they were stolen vehicles where they were being transferred into the thieves' name, or not only in Ontario, but according to the article, in other provinces as well. As shocking as that case is, there are likely many more that are going undiscovered, said Mike Fair, who was once on the Edmonton Police's car theft unit and now works at a company that examines cars to discover if their numbers match. I would say that this is all across the country. We have stolen vehicles that are all across the country continually. It's mobile. The investigation into Bear, Johnson, and others, named Project Myra by the Ontario Provincial Police, followed clues from the Greater Toronto Area to Sudbury and even Saskatchewan. Officers were called to a car theft back in 2021 when 5 men forced their way into a home just east of Toronto, demanding the residents' keys and firing a shot into the ground. A video of that night shows the group rushing up the stairs at about 1:45 a.m. and then rushing away. Some of the masked men go into a waiting car in the street, while others jump into a $400,000 Bentley Bentayga SUV that is sitting on the driveway. The thieves turn the keys. The SUV lights turn on and the car drives away. The hunt for the thieves led investigators to a company in Sudbury, Ontario. That business was registering cars, even though an OPP report filed in court said officers concluded this business does not exist. Some of those cars were discovered on a lot just north of Toronto, belonging to yet another company, this one called Prexco. They accused Johnson, who's the apparent owner of that company, of being the mastermind of a scheme to disguise stolen cars from Land Rovers or Porsches, changing their unique vehicle identification number or VINs so he could sell them. Police allege he disguised a Honda Accord by registering a fake car in Saskatchewan, and police found many plates relating to that province in their search. So, unfortunately, I guess our bad habits not only are spilling out to Alberta, but Saskatchewan as well. So, one source close to the investigation said authorities are exploring whether someone on the inside like Baird could have been involved in arranging paperwork for any stolen vehicles that were sold at a Scarborough dealership, whose salespeople are also facing charges. That's not the only case. Civil forfeiture records describe how 2 employees at a Service Ontario in Scarborough pushed faked VINs through government databases. I have seen other stories about the same scenario where Service Ontario workers were involved in the same sort of scam. I believe there was another story back in 2024 about this exact same scenario. A search of their homes reveals reams of car registration documents and license plates, the civil forfeiture documents say. The civil forfeiture proceeding is Ontario's attempt to recover some assets allegedly used to commit crimes. The employees are still facing charges that have been not yet been to court. Ontario's Minister of Transportation, Prabmeet Sakaria, said the province has introduced new legislation that would make it harder for anyone to illegally re-VIN a car. But doesn't detail what that actual legislation is, but I'll keep an eye on that to see what that will entail. But that's always a sore point when it comes to insurance fraud, when it comes to the phantom vehicles being registered as well as stolen vehicles. So nice to see Ontario is trying to do something about it, but really this needs, I think, to federal government intervention to work on a national strategy to try and combat it. Because as we see from this story, these sort of operations are not limited to just the one province, but can go across provincial borders. Our next story deals with a scenario in Quebec that deals with fraud on a different level, though. Quebec's Auto Insurance Board searched amid probe into $1.1 billion digital overhaul. Once again from Josh Recamara. Quebec's Quebec Anti-Corruption Unit has searched the headquarters of the province's Automobile Insurance Board as scrutiny continues over the agency's costly digital transformation project. The search amid ongoing controversy linked to the rollout of SACClick, an online platform designed to modernize services such as driver's license renewal, road test scheduling, and the province's no-fault insurance system. A report from the Auditor General earlier this year found the platform cost $1.1 billion, which is $500 million more than originally expected. The Auditor General also concluded that $222 million in cost overruns has been broken into smaller line items to avoid public and political scrutiny. The findings prompted calls for increased transparency and accountability from several opposition parties. The Unité Permanente Anti-Corruption, or UPAC, confirmed that the search took place at the offices of the Société de l'Assurance Automobile de Québec in Quebec City. For those of you who are not familiar with the insurance system in Quebec, they have a rather unique system that's not utilized in any other province, territory in Canada, or any state in the US. I'm not sure if anywhere else they might use this system, but if you're injured in an automobile accident in your particular province or territory, normally you would seek compensation if you have an automobile insurance policy. First there, if not, there are other sources to try and seek compensation for your injuries. However, in Quebec, they have a unique system where they have this organization. It's similar to a crown corporation called the Société de l'Assurance Automobile de Québec, or SAC as it's known. If you're injured in an automobile accident in Quebec, you cannot sue for your injuries. So if you're a resident of Quebec and you are injured in an automobile accident, you cannot sue for your injuries. Compensation for your injuries, for medical expenses, lost wages, that is provided by SAC. So you would apply with SAC for compensation. There's a schedule of benefits that SAC provides, and that is how you're compensated. You do not need to have a driver's license, own a vehicle. As long as you're a resident of Quebec, and non-residents of Quebec, as far as I know, can also, if they're injured in an automobile accident in Quebec, can also apply for benefits through SAC. So nobody has to worry about compensation in terms of what source they're going to be seeking compensation from, whether they were a passenger in a vehicle, a pedestrian. They're always going to be going to SAC for compensation for their injuries. Like I said, for all the different expenses one incurs because of that. But like I said, in exchange for that, you cannot sue for your injuries in Quebec. Same thing in Manitoba. You cannot sue for your injuries in Manitoba either. They are called absolute no-fault jurisdictions. In Ontario, you can still sue for injuries you suffer in an automobile accident, but there are restrictions when it comes to that. So Alberta, Ontario, all the maritime provinces, they are not absolute no-fault systems. They are hybrid no-fault systems where there's the option to seek compensation through an automobile insurance policy or to go to court. However, like I said, most provinces, including Ontario's, has some restrictions in the ability to sue for taking your case to court to seek compensation. However, it declined to provide further details. The statement, the unit said searches are generally conducted to gather evidence that could support or disprove allegations or wrongdoing. And sorry, getting back to SAC, they are funded, as far as I know, through vehicle registration fees and driver's license fees as well. That's how they get their funding in order to provide the benefits. So there's no policy that gets sold to anybody. Like I said, all citizens of Quebec are automatically covered, and that's how they are funded. So when you see comparisons in the news about the cost of insurance in different provinces, you really can't include Quebec in that comparison, since vehicle owners in Quebec, when they purchase automobile insurance, because automobile insurance is still mandatory in Quebec as it is for every province and territory in Canada. But drivers in Quebec, when they purchase automobile insurance, they're not purchasing accident benefits, and they're not purchasing bodily injury liability insurance for their vehicles for accidents that take place in Quebec. They would still have bodily injury coverage, but that is for accidents that take place outside of Quebec. So if a Quebec motorist takes their vehicle to New Brunswick and gets into an automobile accident and causes injuries to a third party, then their insurance is there to cover the lawsuit that will be coming from that resident of New Brunswick. But because a Quebec policy doesn't have or require coverages for bodily injury accident benefits, that is a large chunk of the premium for vehicles in most other provinces. So that is why automobile insurance seems so much cheaper in Quebec, is because it doesn't have those same coverages that's required in other provinces and territories in Canada. Problem with SAC Click first surfaced in early 2023 when the platform's launch led to long wait times at service centers and widespread complaints from users. The backlash led the provincial government to suspend a separate facial recognition project that was being planned by the board. Premier Francois Legault initially resisted calls for a formal investigation, but later announced a public inquiry into the matter. The inquiry remains ongoing, and the SAC platform continues to be a focus of public and political attention. Opposition parties have suggested the situation reflects a broader issue in the province's management of major digital infrastructure projects. So I don't know what it is about governments that software developers seem to make easy targets for when it comes to overinflating project costs. I'm sure we can all remember the ArriveCan fiasco. The cost of that, it was what, around $55 million for an app where most app developers said they could have developed for $50,000. And here we go with a scenario in Quebec where the cost for their particular platform doubled from the original anticipated costs. But I've seen that in other provinces as well. We had a scenario here in Ontario, the e-health scandal, electronic health records, and that particular platform, the cost overruns were extreme as well. So I don't know what it is when it comes to governments and trying to keep these costs under control when it comes to these sort of platforms, but what can you do? But speaking of governments and regulators, so that is all the fraud issues I have to discuss today. But there is a tool being created by the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. That particular body who answers to the Ministry of Finance here in Ontario, they license and regulate not only insurance in Ontario, but certain other financial sectors as well. So they license, in the insurance industry, they license insurance companies, insurance agents, and public and independent adjusters here in the province of Ontario. But they have created a new program to try and combat auto insurance fraud. So from Josh Racamera again, got to thank him one of these days for all these articles he's putting out. Ontario's Financial Services Regulator is moving forward with new measures to address auto insurance fraud through more structured reporting requirements and data collection practices. The Financial Services Regulatory Authority, or FSRA, announced that its Fraud Reporting Service (FRS) rules and guidance will require auto insurers to submit specific fraud-related information to FSRA on an ongoing basis. Data collected will support the regulator in determining the overall scale of auto insurance fraud in the province and identifying emerging trends that may require regulatory or industry intervention. FSRA also aims to use the information to establish a baseline for tracking changes in fraud levels over time and to measure the effectiveness of anti-fraud initiative. FSRA said the rule has been approved by Ontario Minister of Finance. It will apply to all automobile insurers in Ontario and will come into effect once the government proclaims that related amendments to the Insurance Act into force. According to FSRA, better identification and response to fraud can help reduce system costs, which may lead to more stable or lower automobile insurance premiums for consumers. That would always be welcome because it's been a long time. It's been quite a few years since we've seen anything close to stable auto insurance premiums, never mind lower. The regulator emphasized that tackling fraud is a shared responsibility across insurers, service providers, and regulators, and that improved transparency will continue to broader consumer protection efforts in the sector. So great to see FSRA taking on the role of trying to coordinate. Not sure why this wasn't implemented a lot sooner, but better late than never, I suppose. But that's always an issue because you have the each insurance company that's trying to tackle fraud on their own. And as I was saying previously, you need to have a coordinated effort to try and combat fraud, regardless of if we're talking about in the insurance industry, banking sector. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. Having individual players trying to combat it on their own only goes so far because each individual insurance company only has a small piece of the picture, especially when it comes to more sophisticated organization that's involved in fraud. You really need the coordinated effort of one organization that's taking all the points of data into it to try and see the big picture in terms, especially when it comes to more organized groups just trying to commit fraud. So like I said, great to see FSRA trying to take the lead or putting in some sort of new program anyway. So any attempt to combat is great in my book. So, and with that, that is it for today. So automobile insurance fraud, always an issue, but fraud in other sectors as well: property insurance, liability insurance, life insurance, accident and sickness. It's always ongoing. Therefore, you really can't drop your guard when it comes to doing your part to try and combat fraud, whether it be somebody in the industry or somebody in the authorities, police services, or just a member of the general public. So with that, that is it for me for today. Thank you very much for joining me, and I will see you next time on Insurance in Canada. Bye-bye.